So we'll go ahead, I think, and get started with our panel, which, as you can see, and which you see in your schedules too, is called The Elephant in the Room. And we'll sort of explain that in just a few minutes. We're going to start with just sort of an introduction of the people on the panel itself, probably starting with myself. And to say also that we're all in one way or another involved with the Donna organization, which is about gender inclusion and diversity within the games industry across all kinds of spectrums, not only gender, but definitely with a gender focus. Or we've been involved in the community in some way, in the player community, and we represent from education, industry, and as I said, the player community. So I'll let everybody sort of go around and introduce themselves and just say that I'm Lissa Holloway-Attaway. I work here at the University of Skövde, and I teach and do research in the Division of Game Development. And part of my research is definitely focused on issues that have to do with diversity and inclusion, gender and feminist perspectives on games, but also other media, as well as thinking about the social context in which media like games are an integral part. So that will have some basis for the kinds of conversations I think we'll have today, thinking about what is the culture and what is the community that is engaged by a complex media object like a game. But we'll start, and we'll just start at this end and kind of go through the panel. If you just say a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm Lillie Klefelt, and I founded an esport community called Female Legends 5 years ago now, I think. And the last 3 years, I've been working on a project that ended in a report on, that's called Go Back to the Kitchen, Why Are There No Women in Esports? So we've been hosting these esport camps with a lot of young girls. Half of the time they were playing their game with a coach and getting better, and half of the times were workshops and interviews. And we have where they got to talk about this kind of subjects, and now we summarized it into a report. And at the moment I'm working as a project manager for Nattskiftet esport.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Julia Scheving. I'm a game writing student and a recent member of Donna. It's been really fun and to join and stuff.
Hi, my name is Anita Stenholm. I've been co-organizing Donna Day with Jenny Brusk here, and I've previously worked at the university on different projects as a research assistant, and also through several game projects as a QA. Yep.
I got one. I'm good. I'm Hanna Beuger. And I've been working for Coffee Stain here in Skövde for about 5 years now. I do world design, I do writing, narrative design, that kind of stuff. I've been involved with Donna Day since the beginning, which was a lot of fun when I was still, I think, interning here. And it's a great time every year, so thank you.
Yes, hi, I'm Jenny Brusk. I almost lost my voice today. I have many hats. I am sort of on leave of absence from the university, where I work as a senior lecturer and teacher researcher in game development. I've worked with games for 25 years, starting as a game developer in the 90s when no one knew that there were a games industry in Sweden. And I'm currently at Science Park Skövde working with startups and also as an innovation manager. And I'm also the founder of Donna. And so I'm still coordinating Donna and also Donna Day that we have every year now since 5 years. And Donna is 10 years old, so we're also celebrating that today, okay?
Yes, thank you. And that's part of this, thinking about this theme of the elephant in the room. And by that we mean, you know, this is through the span of the Donna organization, also through the span of the last 5 years of being part of Donna Day, it's been a time of change and a time of calls for change within the games industry when it has to do with thinking about issues of diversity and creating safe workspaces. And when issues are surfacing in the news about bullying in the workplace and harassment in workplace, all of these issues together. During the span of time that Donna has been together, it's been a kind of a core focus to sort of lift up these problems and issues and challenges within the gaming industry, and also to celebrate the successes of how people have dealt with those things. But we realized when we were right in the midst of sort of planning this 5th Donna Day, and then realizing it's technically about the 10th anniversary of Donna, that this might be a time for us to have a more focused conversation about what's at stake if we don't talk about some of these issues that have to do with inclusion and diversity, and what are the conversations we're having in our communities, such as our educational communities, but also in industry and among a diverse group. So our representatives here, as I said, are from player communities, from student communities, from development communities, but also educational communities. And I think one way to start is just to ask your input, and you can answer in whatever order you like, or not answer if you don't want to. But to say, what are the conversations? How does current news affect or impact you? And who have you been talking to, and what have you been saying in your outreach community?
I guess I can start. I think the main thing is, especially with the recent month, we've seen all the big companies come out with, a lot of bad reports of sexual harassment and so on within the companies. And I've heard that has scared a lot of young, students and people who want to get into the industry. It scares them away. And that's understandable, and you see the big media headlines of all these bad things that's happening, but one of the things we've talked about is well, just because it's bad doesn't mean we can't change it for the better, and that it will be bad when we get there. We need to be part of to solve this. So it'd be we're going to put a stop to this, we're going to change this. We can't let this scare this away, because then they win. And we don't like losing, right? We want to win. And I think that's you have to realize this is it. It really is a good place to work. If this is your dream, don't give up on it. Fight for it, and we can make a change. We have to be part of the change if it's going to happen. And even just by continuing, even just by standing up, even just doing small things can help. And yeah, I think that's the main thing is don't give up.
Thank you.
Yeah, but for us, this is not a new thing. These things has been going on. The new thing is that you actually talk about it, and that women are realizing that this is not okay. It's not supposed. I'm not supposed to be treated this way, and we have a really hard time with working with that in the community, actually, because we're afraid to scare the girls away. So sometimes when we do put up ads for go with us to DreamHack and stuff like that, we have to shut down the commenting section, because we know that if we just let it roll, then people will write stuff, and that will scare the girls away. And also when we're talking about stuff that we heard, through our investigation and so on, we can't really, all those stories, we don't tell them on all platforms, because we don't want to, make an environment where women are not feeling welcome, or they are scared to actually enter it. At the same time, we want to encourage women to actually speak out and to not be a part of this and have to work in this kind of conditions. So I think it's a hard thing to work with.
I also feel one of the issues with this is that we miss the positive side as well. This is a conversation that's been going on at work a lot for us. We have a work environment that we think is definitely built on kindness and trust, and we want to continue building that. But that is something you don't really hear. The news always focuses on the negative aspects, on the things that go wrong. And when you're in a place that feels right, you don't really have to talk about it, because there's nothing wrong. You're fine where you are. So I think it's also about exposure of the good things that happen, the studios that do make a change, that do support women or any other minority, and initiatives that support these things too. Coffee Stain, I've been working with Coffee Stain in an initiative called Leveling the Playing Field, and that has been all about sponsoring companies that are majority owned by people who identify as female, and now also ethnicities that aren't depicted as much in media or work in the industry as much. And that is stuff that it's been really hard for us to sort of get publicity on this, to get like eyes on it, because it kind of just gets lost in the noise of everything going wrong. So yeah, that's something that we're talking about a lot, of how to change that attitude as well.
Yeah, I think that's so important. It's part of the conversation we've been having over Donna Day as well, to say that one, in a strange way, one of the positives are when things come to light, you know, like when they're lifted up, that means that people are talking about them. They're at least being exposed in that way, but that doesn't necessarily offer solutions, you know, but the solutions may be there, as you say, finding ways to share the positive experiences, which we'll also talk about here, I think is really important, because it's complex, it's never one thing, and the media doesn't necessarily represent reality. That's why those conversations, trying to get into what the reality is complex, which is not to disprove or approve any of it. But Jenny, what do you have to share?
Yeah, because this is something that has been going on for so long, and I totally agree with you, Lillie, that now we're talking about it. That's the difference. And that's actually a good thing, because then we can address the issues and we can sort of make, you know, demand companies to actually start working with it. But there were some attempts already, around Gamergate. And I was thinking of Diversity, which was an initiative from the Swedish game industry. What's it called? To try to gather all people, like it was representatives from the companies, reporters, game reporters. We were there as representative of Donna, but also of the universities and other schools. That we would try to actually create a platform for working with diversity and sort of get rid of the hatreds and the sexual harassments and all of that in the games industry. But this was in 2014. And we can still see that, okay, we started there. So there was a work going on, but we're not finished. I think we also have to see that this is an ongoing work, and we will have these reports on a regular basis, unfortunately. But if we can make, you know, management deal with these issues and not sorry, it's not our problem. We are the victims of a problem, perhaps, but it must be addressed from the top to the bottom, because otherwise there will be no change. I mean, this is structural, systematic, you know, abuses. It cannot be the victims who should solve the problem.
No, I totally agree with what Jenny said. Like, this is a work in progress, and it will take years. Like, for example, I started studying games during Gamergate era, and so as we work more and more, and there's so many initiatives right now that want to inspire people, minorities within games to, you know, stand up and talk about these issues. And the more we work, the more people are going to go into these management roles as well. And I think we will soon start to see a change with these people that had these initiatives and been in these communities, actually pushing forward the work where it's supposed to happen. You know, but it's good that we're talking, and we're probably going to see more of these reports. But my hope is that it's going to simmer down eventually.
Yeah, I think the other thing to say about that is that, of course, I mean, we're here and we're focused on the games industry, and we talk about the complexity of that, and how does harassment begin or start, or what does it even look like? You know, what can be, you know, there's obvious forms of bullying and harassment, but then there's these sort of other kinds of microaggressions and smaller things that come out that are hard to place. But this is, you know, it's even not just a gaming industry problem, right? It's a world problem. There are things that go beyond all of this, and I think sometimes it can feel really overwhelming then to even identify, as you say, you know, you can hope things will get better, or maybe they'll get worse, or what does better even mean, and how do we do that? So I'm wondering if you could share sort of any kind of practical or sort of singular experiences that either brought a problem to your tension, where you recognized that something was sort of wrong, or where you recognized that there was a solution to something that you didn't see before, where you feel like there's a positive way that you felt like you could intervene, recognize, or change your own community or environment?
Yeah, I had one of my biggest like revelations for myself was when we founded Female Legends in the autumn of 2016. And in the beginning it was just supposed to be a Facebook group where the girls on another camp that we had worked could get together and play games and create teams and so on. And then it just grew bigger and bigger. And one of the things we started to talk about was that they wanted to see each other for real. We need to do some kind of event. So now I was like, okay, let's go to DreamHack, because I've been going to DreamHack all my life and love it, And then it was a lot of like, reactions. And I was like, okay, so what can we do? And one thing they said was like, okay, but usually, you're the only girl on the rows, and it's like rows of 33 people, and people are looking at you when you come in, and people are looking over your shoulder, what are you playing? It's like, yeah, okay, I can recognize that. So maybe we can, buy a row together where we can sit, and people are like, yeah, that's a really good idea. And then I asked, okay, is there something else that we can do to make this a more positive experience? And a lot of them were like, yeah, it would be nice to have like a sleeping area for women and non-binary. And I was like, what? Why? Why? I mean, we're just gamers. Why can't we just sleep in the same room? What's the issue? And then I got to hear the stories of stuff that happened to the women that have been sleeping in the common sleeping area. And I was just like dumbstruck. It's like, of course. And just because I haven't been through these issues, I never seen this. I didn't even know this. Of course, if I had thought about it, I could have realized, but I haven't seen this. It's like, this is not about me. This is not about like my experience. There's a lot of experience that I don't have, thank God. And I realized that you just have to, think outside the box and ask a lot of people, ask for their experience. And you don't have to actually have experienced them themselves, as long as you're, listening to the people who has.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was thinking like, I also have not had any personal experience myself, but hearing other people's experiences and like just what they've gone through is like in a way also heart-wrenching, and it's also like, okay, no, but this needs to change. Just because it's never happened to me doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Of course it happens, and you have to help and be like, okay, but let's change this. And I think I'm not going to take credit for this. I heard it at the Donna Day panels, but we asked like, what are some toxic red flags? Because just blatant sexist remarks or any just harassment or any mean remarks, those can sometimes be obvious, but some smaller things you might not think about. For example, one that I've kind of taken to heart is like, if a woman or anyone really says an idea, no one really reacts to it, and then typically a man says the same idea a few minutes later, and everyone's like, oh, that's such a good idea. It's like, whoever said it first, they deserve the credit. It should not be taken by someone else. And it's like hearing people who have gone through that, it sucks, because it's like, that was your idea. You should have credit for that. You should be getting praised for that, not this person who's blatantly stole it just because they have something hanging out from them. So it's like, just you want to change this, you want to be a part of this, because this shouldn't happen. It's like whoever had the idea, they get credit for it, no matter who they are. No one else should take the credit. And just, is the small things, or like silent treatments, like you're being ignored, is like, those are the small red flags you should be aware of. It's like, since I haven't been through anything myself, it's also hard to see those warning signs. It's like, through Donna Day, I was like, oh, I can be aware, now I know what to look for. Now I know, like, these are red flags, this is bad. And see like, okay, how can I stand up against it? What can I do against it so that it never leads to anything worse?
Yeah, I think what you're talking about there is being an ally in lots of ways, and we can be allies for lots of different people, meaning that it's, as you say, not about what happens to you, but being the person who speaks up in the meeting and says, well, wait a minute, I think that was, did you talk about that? Or even just saying, sometimes coming to somebody after a meeting saying, you seem to be quiet, in a meeting or in a conversation. Is there something that you have to share? Is there some other way you'd like to share it? Or do you feel, do you feel that you need to have your voice be heard in some kind of way? That happens with teaching a lot. There is that sense when you're a teacher that, of course, you pay attention to the person who's always talking in the room, but that doesn't mean that people don't have other information to share or might not be comfortable in that forum, and trying to find different methods to make sure people's voices are included is that ally. So, yeah. Anita.
Yeah, that resonates with me so bad. For example, this negativity within the culture and the community has kind of shaped to the person that I am. I've kind of internalized it and just made it to a positive thing. For me, it's okay, so there's a chance that my voice won't get heard. Then I just speak louder. So I'll just do the opposite and just do it more extreme. To some, that might be that they might take that as me being annoying. But, to me, I feel like, and hearing these stories from Donna, they really brought to light something that, it was me thinking the same things when I was a student a couple of years back. And I'm like, oh, these things still happen. So now I'm going around, if I see my Donna Day students, I'll be like, don't quit, don't stop what you're doing, continue, push through. It's gonna be hard, but it's gonna be worth it, hopefully in the end,
Thank you.
I've had kind of two eye-opening experiences, and they both happened when I was studying games. This was in the Netherlands. And one of them was the study that I entered, it had a process of elimination. It was kind of a part, you had to do interviews, you had to do certain assignments to get into the study because there were so many applicants. And something that I heard after I had gotten through in the first year was that guys would come up and ask me, do you think you got in because you're a woman? Because they were basically, I was one of 4 women in a class of 100-ish for that year. And that was a moment where I was like, oh, this is real. It's not theoretical anymore. And it took me a little bit of time to recognize how that affected me, basically, and how that kind of just made me go, actually, no, I don't think that. And basically, all my energy went into just doing my own thing. And I think that sort of helped me, sort of deal with that attitude of I'm only here because I'm a token minority. I'm only here to add to the numbers for the university. Plus, another thing, a positive experience that I had was that there was a guy who was harassing some ladies at the university, regularly. And we went to a teacher that we trusted with this, who was advocating for women's rights and for diversity in general. And the problem was dealt with, and we all went away feeling that we were at peace with it. And that was a moment where I was like, if you have someone who has the power to make a change that you can trust, that is invaluable, because that can make all the difference. And that made me want to be that person. So, yeah, basically that.
That's wonderful. And another sign, too, that when we think about organizational structures, making sure that there are people in place whose job it literally is to be an advocate on all kinds of levels, not necessarily just that, whether it's your HR department, which we've talked about, that couldn't function and then cannot function, or just an individual, again, that you can trust that those kinds of conversations can be dealt with, so it doesn't become personal, I think is also interesting. Jenny, I'm sure you have things to say.
I was thinking, where should I begin? Because I have so many stories after my many years in the industry, but I also have many testimonies. But if I would say where I started to get pissed off, I think it was when I got the job in the games industry in 1996. And the exact same thing happened to me because I was hired. And there was this other guy who I knew who didn't get the job, and he was like, well, you got it because you're a woman. And I was thinking, yeah, that's true. But it was because the company wanted to have diversity in their company. So, and it's not, I mean, this guy had the exact same education as I had. So it wasn't like he was better sort of prepared or anything. It was just that they wanted to have a diverse workplace. So I was totally fine with that because I knew that, but you're not better than me. It's not like you have been, So, yeah, well, good for me. But then, even though this was a workplace where they actually actively recruited female game developers, they still had the idea that if you have a lot of women applying for a certain job, it means that there are so many people, so many, you have so many applicants, so you can lower their salaries. So for some reason, all the female staff had I could draw a line and say, okay, above this line we have all the male co-workers, and below this line, salary line, we have all the female workers, even though they had the same education and same job description. And it was, no, because it's so easy to find them now, so we don't have to, sort of work so hard on recruiting them. And so that is why, we can always get another one. It's like, this, what do you call it, the utbud-efterfrågan, I don't know, supply and demand, yeah. So now we have a good supply, so then we can lower their salaries. And it was always when you had a lot of female applicants, then it's like, yeah, but then we can lower their salaries. Another thing that's very common, of course, I've been, been taken for the receptionist, like obviously. So I never answered the phone. Because if I did, and they asked me questions about a game, so they say, I want to talk to, to a developer. Yeah, well, you're talking to one. No, I want to talk to someone who knows about this part of the game. Yeah, you can talk to me. Do you know this? Like, yeah, do you want me to help you? And so that was like regular. What else? Yeah, but another thing that I still feel happens to me is that you get excluded from important meetings or sort of discussions and things that you think, okay, according to my job descriptions, I should probably be in that meeting, and I'm not invited. Why is that? And that happens to me actually still, and that can make me really, really, really furious, to be honest. Typically, I would then address this issue in a very straightforward manner, and typically it would probably be well addressed, or well sort of responded to. But I shouldn't be, I shouldn't have to do that, right? I shouldn't have to be angry all the time. So I'm sorry if I'm angry all the time, but I have very many reasons for that, to be honest. Yeah, that was a long story.
No, I think we can, first of all, I would say, if you're not angry, you're not paying attention. So there's no problem with being angry. Angry is a motivation to move forward. It doesn't have to be toxic in some way. But I would also say, that kind of, you say being mistaken for the receptionist, or that there are presumptions about you in all places. It happens at all levels, even as somebody who teaches and does research in games. I'm constantly being sort of cred checked in terms of what do you really know based on your background or what you study, or if I'm interested in things beyond games, if I want to talk about media, or if I don't have the perspective as a player, but I want to study games as just a socio-cultural object from lots of different perspectives, and use a word like having a feminist perspective, or looking even just at inclusion or something, that can come back in a hostility where I've been either in reviews of articles or conference papers, or in the audience of something where there is this sort of hostility. You have to feel that you have to specially defend yourself in some kind of a way. And I find that still shocking in my community of, as a senior researcher and as a person who has a lot of experience doing that, still dealing with sometimes just I'm shocked sometimes by the hostility that comes toward me just in a kind of a public space, and it can be intimidating, you know. So again, it's so enlightening. Even though I was so sad to hear at Donna Day a couple of people saying, you know, that they feel really afraid to go out into the community, that there are lots of other people who are like Julia who are saying, you know, fight, and Anita, that I feel like there's a change here in our university culture, for sure, in terms of over the span of 7 years I've been, that people have, the community changes. It's not just a small group of, you know, women. It's a big, diverse community of people who are interested in the problem or the challenges. So I'm just wondering, Jenny, could you just say a little bit before we come? Oh, I'm sorry, Julia. I'm sorry. See, look at me overlooking you.
No worries. I was just thinking a lot what Hannah you were saying, and Jenny as well. One of honestly my biggest fears is that I would be accepted into a job because I'm a woman. I want to be accepted because I'm the best. I'm the best choice. That's why I want to be offered a job. However, I think it's different for you, Jenny. You're like the one you explained, where it's like they wanted diversity, because if you have the same skill level, it's different. But I don't want to be picked over someone who is better than me just because I'm a woman. That is my biggest fear, and honestly, like something I kind of fear when you think about, like, you know, gender movements and we want more women in the workplace. But it's like, that's not what it is. It's not what we do. We're not like, oh, just give me a job just because I'm a woman. No. We just want it to be equal. We just want to have our voices heard and not be like put down or anything like that. And I think it's important to see those two differences, and it's like don't give me a job just because I'm a woman, give me a job because I'm the best, and then don't discriminate against me. That's what I want. And I think it is really important to have diverse work environments. It is very important to have every kind, minorities, people of different cultures, everything like that is really important, because as we talked about on Donna Day, you get different perspectives, you get different, everything is like, it's only positive to have diverse environments of all kind. And I was also going to comment, Hannah, on your, like, with being a part of Ally, like, it really hit close to home for me when you said, like, you and a group of friends went to try to, like, to help this person who was getting harassed. As someone who was bullied and no one helped me, like that, it hit so close. Like just you standing up for someone who is struggling to do it themselves helps more than you can ever believe. It, like, if I had someone who came up to me, like, I joked with my boyfriend, like, he's like, if I knew you when you were bullied, I would, like, you know, stop it, because he's that kind of person, but we didn't go to the same school or anything. I was like, I would have married you on the spot. Because, like, if someone just stood up for me when I was the most vulnerable, when I could not stand against myself, and then to have people, even if it's afterwards, it shows you care, and you're like, I want to help you. Like, it, just be an ally, help people who can't or are struggling to help themselves, because it is very difficult when you are in that vulnerable position, no matter what it is. It's so important.
That's why a forum like this is so important, because we can help each other get through this. Stronger together and all that. But I wanted to comment on something you said, because I don't think necessarily getting hired because you're a woman has to be a bad thing. I think that can actually be a strength, because when you talk about skill level, I think there are different kinds of skill that you can talk about, because there are the hard skills, like whether you're a good game developer, but there are soft skills that are equally, if not more so, important, which diversity tends to strengthen, which is teamwork skills, different perspectives, cultural diversity in general. So being hired as a woman, even if your hard skill level might be lower than another man, I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, because you offer something that he cannot to the company.
Yeah, that's very true. I agree on that, and but that's also like a bit in like the skill points, because that, you know, that ups my skills and so on. Because it is often like, you know, companies will hire you like often, as well as like how well do you work with the team. If you have someone who happens to be a man who doesn't work well with the team, then, you know, it doesn't work, because it won't work in the end. Well, if I'm a woman and I do work well with the team, great. That's going to lead to a better product in the end anyway. So it is a little different, but yes, very good point.
Yeah, and another point I was also because I think this is a myth. It's like, because now you're sort of confirming the myth that if you get hired as a woman, then it's because then you must be, you know, at a lower. And I think that they would never hire you if you weren't competent. They couldn't afford you. I mean, it would be like paying for someone who couldn't do the job. That will never happen. So I don't really understand why we even talk about it in that regard. I mean, nobody would hire a person who was incompetent. Like, that would be really, really stupid. Instead, we're thinking that if it's a woman, oh yeah, it's because she's not really competent, right? We never say that about a man. Sorry, but I mean, I've worked with students for so many years, and typically, because of these sort of barriers, the female students are like high achiever, all of them, and still they almost enter the wall, hit the wall, because they are like struggling and struggling. And then you have these, to be honest, a group of mediocre men have, you know, in a surf program, I will not tell you like, oh, this, but you will always have like mediocre people, and that is okay. It's just that it is not okay for a girl, of a woman, to be mediocre, and that's a problem. So they have to be up here, and then you can have like a bunch of guys down here, and they like to feel like, I'm so, you know, relevant in this games industry, and she is like, oh, I have to be so much better. And we're, you know, you're overachieving. You're 10 times better than he is, and still, he thinks he's fantastic, and you don't think you're fantastic. That's the problem, I would say.
One thing that's really sad, that I can see it here, and I can also, that was one of the biggest takeaway from our book, is that women feel alone, and they don't realize that there are a lot of us, and that's usually what happened at the camp as well. Like, the first comment after they'd been together a while was like, I was so afraid to go to this camp because I had a kind of feeling what kind of girls I would meet at this camp, and then I just realized it's a lot of other me. And also when they start to talk about their experiences, and you could see that everybody, you know, starts nodding, and it became a realization that it wasn't me. This is a structure problem. It's not wrong with me. And I mean, I also felt that. You know, I could suddenly hear a story, you know, that resonated with me when I was like 11. I was like, oh God. And I realized that I still have that thought in my head that it was something wrong with me. And there's a lot of talk about, you know, standing up and, you know, also like standing in for others. But I mean, it shouldn't have to be like that. It's so sad that there's not a network or like a basic, like a basic scene where women talk to each other and realize that they are not alone, and actually, you know, can work together to help themselves, not just to help, you know, the environment, but to actually, not struggle in silence.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the conversation that you're raising is also, again, the difficulties of trying to say, well, no, it's a gender problem, or it's a, you know, it's a sex problem, in terms of thinking about, well, if we get more, you know, female people in the room versus more male people in the room, somehow that's going to solve a problem, and you start dealing with the kind of these numbers, or we think, okay, well, now we have to not think about that, and then that will solve it in a sort of other way, to say that it's very complex to think about these experiences. And we know, for example, of course it's important, you know, like in school, one of the successes that I was going to ask you about, Jenny, is that, you know, you do raise the number of women in games education. Like, that has definitely increased, as have, you know, quote unquote, the number of players. Maybe they've always been there, but we haven't really recognized them in that way. But those are important, but that doesn't change the culture. You can have 10 women in a studio and still have a toxic culture if they're not treated sort of in a way. So you have to think across all of these possibilities, which is, again, why we need a big community of people to help think through what, you know, what does matter. So I would ask sort of two things to kind of follow up, and then maybe we can open up for some questions if people have them. But one from Jenny, just to say, you know, what do you think is celebrating 10 years of Donna? What are your successes? What do you think the things you think are, you know, that you're really proud of? And then also, I would say, you know, thinking about female legends and the Lillie, the report that you've come out with, I would love to hear just a brief about what did you discover in your report, and what do you think are successes and things that you feel could be positive for the future?
When it comes to Donna, I'm of course super proud of Donna Day, and that is mainly because we have these awesome people that comes every year and just spread. I mean, when you look at out at all the students and all the mentors, it's like, wow, did we do this? And it's fantastic. It's like super inspiring. Everyone is happy. It's a lot of love in the room. We learn a lot and we exchange, experiences and stories and everything. But I'm also kind of proud over how we have approached, the strategy we have had to work with Donna to sort of make changes in society. And this is not like I invented that, but we took a lot of inspiration from Supermarit, which was an organization that it was a project on Gotland, working with gender equality within the games industry. And they did many of these things that we were doing, but what we did was we continued their work, but sort of adjusted it to fit our thoughts and our way of working in our, university. But to think about it from like what happens before they even enter the university and what happens at the university. How are they welcomed? Is this an inclusive study environment? And then what happens next, entering the work life? How can I need to take responsibility for the students that I sort of try to grab and, hey, you need to study games, and then I don't care what happens afterwards. That doesn't feel very right? So working also towards the games industry, and having Donna Day is just a part of that, working with the transition from student life to work life. And then I can feel that over the years we've been part of making change. I see that we can all make change. We just have to see that we can't do all the change ourselves, but we can do a small piece of it. And I think I try to give that to the students. You cannot just sit and wait. I mean, everything you do is part of contributing to the change, and you can change things. So I think that is something to remember. We all have that power.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway from the report is that the biggest thing that the girls wonder is, why does gender have to be something? Why does the fact that I'm a woman have to impact me? Why can't I just be a gamer? Why can't I just be a part of a friends group and play games? And that resonates with me really hard as well, because I have a lot of friends or people that I know that you don't get invited to games, or you don't get invited to like the internet cafe, or you don't get invited when there's a LAN party. And when you ask them, it's like, oh, sorry, I didn't think about it. And I mean, that could happen to me. It's like, yeah, or like, oh, I didn't know that, I didn't think about that you might want to play games. It's like, no, I just, founded an esport community. Why would I want to play esport games with friends on the evenings? That's crazy, So there is still those kind of things. And the second thing was, as I was talking about before, that a lot of women feel alone, that they feel like it's, they're struggling alone. Another thing is that it's not like one issue. There's a lot of issues, so it's hard to like pinpoint one thing. And it's not like this big step. It's like, it's constantly uphill with steps that you constantly have to climb. It makes it hard. I mean, you can start with the parents. Parents give their daughters 35 minutes less playtime than their sons, according to a study from Friends. So those are the biggest things. And also with the getting treated differently, it doesn't have to be like toxic. It could just be different. We see that there's a lot of like minority stress, that you're constantly afraid that you will get commented on. You can play a complete game and nobody says anything, but you're constantly aware that someone might, and that makes you play worse. Or you're always nervous of fucking up, or you feel like if I fuck up, people are gonna blame me because I'm a woman, and I will show that women can't play games. So that adds to it. And also, we could see in a study that the kind of feedback also differs. That women get like friendly or natural feedback, where guys tend to get more like how to get better kind of feedback. So there's also like a different in how they're being treated overall.
Thank you. I'm wondering if maybe we could, are there questions? Do people have questions or things they would like to share? Maybe we can pass there is a microphone. Oh, there's a microphone there. Okay.
Yeah. Hi. So obviously inclusion is good. I think we can agree. But I can also see people saying inclusion is good, but it doesn't affect me at all if a company is 50% female or if it's 10% female. This is wrong because games are better when they're made by more diverse groups of people. And I wanted to hear examples from you guys of games that have been improved because more diverse points of view were included.
The one we're making. Satisfactory. Coffee Stain has evolved a lot over the past years. I joined about 5 years ago. It is a very different company now. We are much more international, more women, and just generally a lot more diverse. And I can say that the love that goes into the game is much more genuine too. So also work environment improved a lot. So that helps.
I was thinking just like a very small thing, but it's still like, you know, it's still something in Final Fantasy XIV and the expansion Shadowbringers, if anyone doesn't want to hear. It's not really spoilery, but you can cover your ears. It's that they have this tribe of pixies that are not gendered. They go by they, them pronouns, and they use both like king as their monarch title, but they could be like, you could look at them as looking very feminine, but they are not gendered. And I feel like it's such a small, nice inclusion thing that people could relate to. Like it's just a small thing, but it's still like it's there, it's something, and you know, people can walk away like, yes, I feel a little represented.
I mean, we could also see that those games that are more diverse attract more women within the esports scenes. Like Apex has more players female players than PUBG, for instance. Or so when there is an inclusion perspective, like woven into the game, there is the bigger chance that women feel like this game is something that I can play.
So inclusive games have bigger audiences with more money in their pockets.
It's a cheat code. Do it.
Yeah.
No, but one thing that I tend to say is like, guys will always feel welcome because they've always been welcome. They feel like this is their world. You don't have to work with that part because they've always been there. The part that you need to work with is the one that usually not feel included.
We have another question coming.
Hi. So what I wondered about is something that just came up. We spoke about games with more diverse teams, who made them being bigger and having, in general, bigger audiences, and therefore bringing in more profit. What do you think about this thing when diversity becomes like a selling point? Like companies start thinking we need to get diverse because that is going to net us more money. What do you think of that, and how can it be, like, can that be a way of boosting equality, or is it inherently bad?
I think it's an imperfect solution. It's like a halfway solution, sort of, because it's basically giving diversity the capitalism label to make sure that it's accepted. So it's not accepted because it matters to people, it is accepted because it gets money. So it's accepted basically for the wrong reasons, which in a way it has positive effect and it does help, but the underlying reasons why are still problematic, and it doesn't really change the mindsets of the people that make these decisions. So it's a complicated one, I think.
And I also want to comment that if you don't really get it, why you're wanting to be diverse, you're not going to go through with it. You're not going to do it well. It's going to be, if you're in the know-how, you're going to see through that and see, oh, it's just for marketing, right? So I think it can blow up in their face if you need to do this well. Yeah.
I think a prime example of that is, if anyone's seen Avengers Endgame, that one scene where all the women band together and fight, it's horrendous. It's like the worst kind of representation. It's a great example of how not to do it. And pretty much it was fueled by like, oh, we have to be relevant now and do this for our female audience, but they don't understand why.
Thank you for your question.
Oh.
Oh.
No, I
Thank
just
you.
had one
Never
comment
mind, Jen.
because we had this discussion. I was actually having a workshop with the students, even though I'm not on leave of absence, but and it was about sustainability and also this gender inclusion stuff. And they were like, well, okay, I have a suggestion now. A student says, well, I'm thinking about my character. It should be like no sex, no anything, like so anyone can feel like they can relate to it. And I was like, well, it's a good start to thinking like that. But the problem is that if you try to make everything work for everyone, like it's better I don't have any character that has anything at all, because then I cannot be mistaken. Instead, you could think that, okay, how can I include more diversity without them being totally nothing? Because that would probably turn out to be a super bad idea, a super boring game with where you have this. Nothing happens. There are no friction. There's no provocation. Nothing. I mean, we are also working with something. I mean, we're working with art. That means that we have to feel something. But it doesn't mean that all the things we have to relate to is a white man, for instance, or very muscular. It could be anything, but it doesn't have to be totally nothing, right? So I think don't make the mistake of not daring to do anything because you're afraid that you will get attacked because you didn't make that character or that character. I think just think beyond, what we already have.
Yeah, by definition, inclusion means adding more, not taking away. It doesn't mean that we have to water everything down and take things away, but it's saying, but if there are more options and more choices and different kinds of representation and different kinds of players and all of that, then it's a big world. That it's a inclusive, diverse kind of culture.
Yeah, we have had a lot of separatistic tournaments with only female teams, and I mean esport is wonderful in that sense that you don't really have to divide it because it's it's supposed to be equal. I mean you have the same physical possibilities to be good, but what we've seen is that we're doing separatistic stuff. We actually make it more inclusive later. It's like a means to an end. For instance, we had an Overwatch team that competed in the regular Beuger tournament on DreamHack and won it. And we were posting everything about it. It's like, oh, congratulations! And some people were typing, it's like, oh, look, I mean, we don't need separatistic stuff. The girls can play. And I get so angry because I know this team and they've been practicing a lot and they've been playing with us in our when we had our trainings. And they've been participating in, I think it was 2 or 3 all-women tournaments on DreamHack before, and they were coming to DreamHack to participate in the women BIOC that got cancelled because there were too few teams. So they entered, the regular one, and they won it. And it's like, this is not a proof that separatistic things is not needed. This is a proof that it's actually working, that this is a way to actually work with this issue.
Thank you. I'm looking at our time now and seeing that I think because we have other panel coming up and we've spent almost a wonderful hour now talking to everybody, that perhaps we should wrap this up. And I'd like to just thank you all for listening and thank our wonderful panel for sharing all their experiences. So thank you.
Thank you.